Hey everyone, my name is Nimb my cat, and in this video I'm going to be going over everything you need to know for Cassiopeia in Season 11. Season 11 is bringing a bunch of changes to items across the board, and things are going to be much different, so I figured I would make this video as a guide for anyone who's wondering what items to go on Cass, as well as just to give some general tips and knowledge. In terms of credentials, I've got 1 million mastery points on her, and I managed to hit D2 playing mainly her in my second season. I'm aiming for at least Masters in Season 11, and I've been putting a lot of time into the PvE to get a feel for this next season. Now with all of that out of the way, thank you so much for being here, and let's get into it. And just to get this out of the way, yes, the cat jam is going to be there throughout this video. If you couldn't tell by the name, I love cats, so yeah, he's just gonna jam out there in the corner. Also, I just realized he needs something to jam to, so here we go. Alrighty, so first a quick overview of Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is a late game hyperscaling champion who also happens to have one of the strongest level 2s in the game. Early game, her damage is only gated by her ability haste and her mana pool. Due to her low range and built-in healing, she's a champion that likes being just on the outskirts of the fray, pumping out huge amounts of damage and kiting to keep herself out of harm's way. Despite having relatively little mobility, she actually has some really great self-peel with her Q movement speed, her ultimate, and her W. Things to consider early on are playing to conserve your mana, farming well, and avoiding ganks. Alright, next up we're going to be looking at her kit, as understanding her kit is necessary to understand what items to build. Cassiopeia's passive is that she can't buy boots. And instead gains 4 movement speed per level. This passive is deceptively simple and strong, as it opens up a 6th item slot while allowing for very early item completions without feeling like a slug instead of a snake. Cassiopeia has a very low base movement speed of 332 to compensate for this, so it can be hard to dodge early skill shots / poke in lane, so it's something to keep in mind. For Cass, it makes more sense to go over her E before any of her other abilities. Her E, Twin Fang, is a single target ability with an extremely low cooldown and is her main source of damage. Her E does bonus damage when used against a target that is poisoned. Both her Q and W poison targets and grant the bonus damage, as well as Teemo, Singed, and Twitch's poisons. This ability also heals Cass based off of her AP, and the numbers get quite ridiculous late game when you factor in Conqueror and Ravenous Hunter. Next is her Q, Noxious Blast. Her Q ability casts in a small circle after a 0.4 second delay, poisoning the target for 3 seconds and granting decaying movement speed. It has a ridiculous AP ratio late game, so it becomes a good poke tool later on. Practicing with and learning to consistently hit this is extremely important, as if your targets are not poisoned, you are not doing any damage. Next up is her W, Miasma. This ability spits out venom in an arc that leaves poison on the ground. While inside the poison, enemies take a small amount of damage per second and are grounded. This ability is one of Cassiopeia's strongest tools. Enemies that are grounded cannot use any movement abilities. This is extremely flexible in its use as well. It can be used to hold enemies in a bad position or to prevent enemies from being able to engage on you. Her ultimate is Petrifying Gaze. After a 0.5 second cast time, Cass screams in a cone in the target direction, stunning all enemies that are facing her for 2 seconds, and slowing enemies who are facing away by 40%. Being stunned for 2 seconds is an eternity in a league teamfight or in a 1v1, and being able to stun multiple members of a team for that long means that this ultimate can be fight winning on its own. Better opponents will be able to react to the ultimate and turn away. Here's some things to note about her kit. Her Q has a slight cast time on it, so oftentimes you will have to place it where you think enemies will move rather than where they currently are. Also, you don't have to wait for the Q to actually cast to get the bonus poison damage. If your Q is going to hit, you can immediately E and you will still get the bonus damage. Throwing W on top of yourself against champions that dash on you like Yasuo or Yone, and then ulting them while they're in it is a good way to win a duel. Your W has an extremely long cooldown in early ranks, and it is the last ability you max, so messing up / misplacing W can make you lose a duel you otherwise should have won. The last thing of note has to do with the angles at which her ultimate stuns. Enemies do not need to be directly facing you. As long as you are at less than a 90-degree angle relative to your opponent, your ult will stun them. Alright, the next thing we're going to be talking about are the summoner spell choices and the rune choices. So first up we got Teleport, which is a good option to take in farming matchups and is usually for more experienced cast players who know they can manage in lane and know when their power spikes are. Next up is Barrier, which is a great defensive option for surviving against champions that will all-in you. Barrier is especially good when paired with Last Stand, as you can hold your barrier until you're low health to maximize the amount of damage you can get on Last Stand and turn a fight around. The last option is Cleanse. There's not really much to say about it. You take it against lane opponents that have point and click CC, otherwise you go for the other two. For your rune choices, there are 3 different routes you can take, and they depend on your own skill level with casts and what lane opponents you're coming up against. First up, we've got Precision Primary with Conqueror, Presence of Mind, Tenacity, and Last Stand, with Taste of Blood Ravenous as your secondary. This is generally the runes that you will be taking. It scales well, offers early power, mana sustain, and allows you to heal off of waves and monsters late game. The only time you don't take this is out of necessity. For the second route, you go the same primary, but for the secondary, you go Inspiration and you either take Biscuits and Time Warp or Stopwatch and Biscuits. This build is recommended for new players to take this build for matchups that you need to sustain against. It makes early lane more survivable while still offering mana sustain and the benefits of Conqueror. If you go this, you also usually want to start Corrupting Potion. And the third route you can go is the Phase Rush route. For this, you take Primary, Phase Rush, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, and Gathering Storm, with Taste of Blood Ravenous secondary. This is for if you're feeling spicy. Not recommended unless you'll be needing to keep distance from threats. It's good against poke mages that outrange you in lane such as Lux, Vel'Koz, Xerath, and Victor. To trade in lane, you proc Phase Rush and use the movement speed to kite towards them while dodging their CC or any poke that they'll throw off, and then trade into them heavily. It can also be used to quickly proc Phase Rush with a Q and 2 E's to escape ganks. Alright, on to the items. So for this section we're going to start out with the Mythic items first, because generally in Season 11 you're going to want to think about what Mythic item you want to build towards first and then move forward the rest of your build. So with that said, the first item we're going to be looking at is Liandry's Anguish. It comes with 80 AP, 600 mana, 20 ability haste, and its Mythic passive gives 5 extra ability haste to all other legendary items. It also comes with a passive that reads, dealing damage with abilities causes enemies to burn for 15 plus 2.5% of your AP plus 1% of their max health magic damage per 4 seconds. You also gain 5% magic pen against the burning target, stacking up to 25%. This item has a solid build path for cast that gives her the mana she so desperately needs. If you're playing solo queue without a jungler or alongside a jungler who needs their blues, this is most likely the item you want to go. While I believe it's not as overall powerful as Riftmaker in terms of scaling, which is the next item we're going to be looking for, it's not far off. Next up we're going to be talking about Riftmaker, which is an absolutely bonkers item with almost everything that cast wants. It comes with 80 AP, 150 health, 15 ability haste, and 15% Omni Vamp, which is just 15% healing from all damage you deal. This passive is basically Old Conqueror, giving a stacking damage bonus of 3%, converting the bonus into true damage once you reach 15%. It also gives 5% magic pen to all of your other legendary items. While that's certainly appreciated, ability haste or mana would have been better. Hitting 1 Q will fully stack Riftmaker and convert your 15% bonus damage into true damage, though it will quickly fall off if no more damage is dealt/taken. Use this as your posturing for teamfights to go into teamfights as strong as possible. The component Leeching Leer also gives a 10% Omni Vamp, so it's a decent power spike. This is only recommended for players who are confident in their ability to manage their resources, or if you know you can get blues. Next up we're going to be looking at the starter items, of which there are 3 choices. First up is Tear, which is now a starting item. It works a little bit differently than before, and it's the normal start. It should be taken in matchups where it's likely to go even/be a farming lane. It scales the best, it builds into Archangels, which is an item that cast wants to build as there are no other mana legendary items. The way that it works now is that you get 3 mana per ability hit, and 6 if it hits a champion. You get 1 charge every 8 seconds and you can store up to 4. D-Ring is sticking around. It's a little bit different, but for the purposes of cast it's pretty much the same. You take this when you want to bully your laner/skirmish a little bit. This can be taken against assassins who can be bullied like Cat, Zed, Echo, and LeBlanc, or mages who are weak early. It helps to establish lane dominance or prio and Corrupting Potion is the final option for Cass and is taken to survive lane against champions that will poke you out like Syndra, Ori, Vel'Koz, or Xerath. It is recommended this is taken alongside Biscuits and Time Warp secondary, as Cass can benefit a lot off of bursts of mana and percent movement speed. Alright, so next up we're going to be looking at early itemization. These are items that you're going to be looking to pick up on your first couple backs depending on the game state. First up is Darkseal. Darkseal has received some changes with the new season. It currently gives you 15 AP and 40 health along with a buffed Glory passive that gives 5 AP instead of 3. It lost the bonus healing passive and the mana on it, but it currently sits with 40 health and the possibility of 50 extra AP. You will almost never start Darkseal, however, because it has the potential to be an unbelievably strong 350 gold item that can eventually turn into a Medjai's, which synergizes very well with Cass, it's an item that you will almost always want to pick up on your first back. A good first back would be at 785/860 gold for Darkseal, Amptome, and Control Ward. Next up is Leeching Leer. If you're building into Riftmaker, Leeching Leer is the item you want to aim for as your first component. The stats it gives makes you very potent in 1v1 duels so long as you have the mana to finish off your opponent. Getting early blues is extremely important to being able to utilize Cass's full power, especially if you're not opting to go Liandry's Anguish. Speaking of, the next item we're going to be looking at is Lost Chapter. This item was bread and butter for early pickup on Cass previously. If you're going into Liandry's, this is your first item goal. It gives you everything that you want as your first item completion with AP, mana, and some ability haste. Next up is Fiendish Codex. It's a good option if you can't hit other breakpoints cleanly. If I haven't mentioned before, ability haste on Cass is equal to DPS, so Fiendish Codex, if you can't hit others, is a solid option. If you are laning against any AD laners, Seeker's Armguard is your best friend. Pick this up ASAP, play passively until it's stacked to a decent amount, and enjoy the free lane. This item's cost was reduced by 200 with only 5 less AP to boot when fully stacked as compared to before, and this item is off the charts in terms of gold efficiency at 172% after stacking it 30 times. This will probably win early lane by itself so long as you have not already fallen behind. Next up is a new item introduced that seeks to be the MR version of Seekers. With 25 AP and 25 MR, stacking up to 40 after 5 minutes, it's a good item to take against oppressive AP matchups. I'm not going to lie, as a Cass main, when I saw this next item, I shed a tear of joy. With 60 AP, 200 health, and 30 ability haste, and a passive that says, dealing damage with abilities grants 10 plus 20% of your ability haste movement speed for 4 seconds. This item synergizes extremely well with Cass's kit and what Cassiopeia wants to do as a champion in general, especially in combination with Liandry's first, giving you that extra ability haste and making the passive even stronger. From the look of the item, how it felt on the PvE, I cannot wait to play around with this item. Unless a defensive option is necessary, this is your go-to second item. Speaking of, the next 2 items we're going to be looking at are Zhonya's Hourglass and Banshee's Veil. These 2 items are grouped together because you build them for the same reason, just depending on what damage type you need to defensively itemize against. These items are pretty much the same as before, except that Banshee's is a bit cheaper and has a new aforementioned component. Banshee's always felt like it was way too expensive at 3000 gold, so the 500 gold knocked off its cost is very welcome. With the preseason chains, these items will feel even better than before to pick up as defensive options. Next up, we're going to be talking about Archangel Staff. Previously, Archangel Staff was always the first item you picked up on Cass, and it's the only legendary mage item with mana, so Cassiopeia will likely need to pick it up every single game in order to keep herself topped off. This makes the tier start more favorable. With the rework, Archangels has shifted from being Cass's first item every game to being a solid third item. Fully stacked, it grants 60 AP, 850 mana, and 2 passives. One that grants AP equal to 5% of your max mana, and a second one that grants 5% maximum mana based on your AP plus 2.5% per 100 AP. While the utility has been gutted on this item, losing its 20% CDR and its shield from previously, the amount of raw mana and AP scaling it grants still makes it a great option for Cass, especially because she desperately needs a large mana pool. If you go Liandry's, consider getting this item second if you will have it fully stacked by the time, as it will provide a huge power spike. The next item we're going to be looking at is Rylai's Crystal Scepter, which is a core item from Cass from previously, although it's a little bit different now. It's 90 AP, 300 health, and the passive now reads 30% slowing for 1 second upon hitting an enemy with a damaging ability. While the increased price does hurt Cass a little bit, the extra stats are enough of a compensation where it doesn't matter too much. Taking this item allows Cassiopeia to kite melee champions out better, chase down targets, and have a bit more bulk to stay in fights longer. It also allows her to peel herself even better than she already can, and it also makes hitting follow-up Qs much easier. All around, it's a solid 4th or 5th item choice for Cass. If you struggle with hitting follow-up Qs, I recommend picking this item up earlier to help ease that up. The next item up is good old Rabby Dabby. Not much to say, still fulfills the same role as before. Rabadon's is still an insane late game mage item and is a solid 5th or 6th pickup for Cass. With how much Cass scales already, a snake with a cool hat is quite a force to be reckoned with. Lastly, what we're going to be going over is niche legendary itemization. These are items that you generally only go in specific situations. The first item that we're going to be looking at is Demonic Embrace. I honestly wasn't even going to include this in the video because I don't think it's any good, but I decided to anyways because it's a new item. It comes with 70 AP, 350 health, and a passive that grants 1.5% max health burn over 4 seconds. While enemy champions are afflicted, you gain 10 MR and armor, plus 2.5 for each additional champion that's affected. It's a niche middle ground defensive item for when you need to itemize defensively against AP and AD, but in general I just don't think the item's any good on Cass at least. The next niche item is Frozen Heart. Frozen Heart is a good option if you're going up against an all/mostly AD team. Giving 400 armor, 20 ability haste, and 400 armor. Giving 80 armor, 400 mana, and 20 ability haste, it gives 3 very desirable stats. On top of all of that, it comes with 2 solid passives. The first one reduces the attack speed of nearby enemies by 15%, and the other one reduces the damage of incoming attacks by 0.5% of your max health, capped at 40% of the attack's damage. Pairing this item with Seraph Embrace, it also grants an additional about 12 AP. With all of these things in mind, Frozen Heart is an absolute monster of an item when it's purchased at the optimal situation. Similar to the relationship that Zhonya's and Banshees have, Spirit Visage is an item that you would take in the same situation as Frozen Heart, just when you're up against mostly AP enemies as opposed to AD. Spirit Visage grants 450 health, 40 MR, 10 ability haste, 100 base health regen, and it comes with a passive that increases the amount of healing and shielding you receive from all sources by 25%. This is especially good with Cass, as between Conk, Ravenous, and her E, and Riftmaker if that's your mythic of choice, she actually has a ridiculous amount of healing. And finally, the last item in this video that we're going to go over is Void Staff, and there's not much to say. It's about the same boat as Rabadon's in terms of fulfilling the same role as it did last season. Generally, Cassiopeia as a champion doesn't really need Magic Pen, and when you're going either Liandry's Anguish or Riftmaker, you'll probably have enough pen anyways, but there will probably be some niche situations where you come up against a bunch of tanks who are stacking MR, and in that situation, Void Staff is a good pickup. But other than that, you don't really need pen. And that just about wraps up everything that I wanted to cover. The reason why I made this video is, one, I looked around on YouTube and couldn't find too many prominent Cassia one-tricks / mains, so I thought there was a niche that I could fill, and also because I'm really passionate about Cassio and this game in general. She's such a fun, skill-intensive champion that will make you feel like you can always do something better, and I love that feeling when playing games. I've played video games pretty much my entire life, and League is the first game where I feel driven enough to pursue it more fully than any other. I'm extremely excited about this upcoming season, and I have high hopes for how high I can go both on ladder and maybe professionally. If you enjoyed the video and you want to see me do more content like VOD reviews, like one of a PBE game where I go 43-3, stream highlights, and high-level ranked gameplay, consider dropping a like, a sub, and a follow over at my Twitch at twitch.tv/nimbismycat. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you are all doing well, taking care of yourself and others, and I hope you have a fantastic day.